4 pirates! On board, 4 pirates!
Soldiers I killed are accountable. Maybe 20 men are on the boat. Maybe I killed 3.
The sea was quiet, almost unnaturally so. No gulls circled overhead, no engines droned in the distance, only the slow, heavy breath of the Indian Ocean.
It could be a dangerous place for Westerners to visit. As a Westerner, you stand out. There's not many foreigners in Somalia.
Far beyond the horizon, 5 small shapes skimmed across the water like dark insects, closing in fast. On the bridge of an American cargo ship, a captain watched them grow, their wakes slicing the waves like blades. Within minutes, the crew would be fighting for their lives against heavily armed Somali pirates. But what they and the pirates couldn't see was that 400 miles away, a U.S. aircraft carrier was already turning toward them. Setting the stage. The waters off Somalia have long carried a dangerous reputation. Merchant ships passing through know these waves can hide fast boats filled with men who see the sea as a hunting ground. That morning, the American cargo ship MV Redwood Star was making steady progress along its route. It carried expensive industrial equipment worth hundreds of millions, bound for busy ports in Asia. The crew was mixed: Americans, Filipinos, and a captain who had seen storms, accidents, and long months at sea. They understood the risks here, but routine and calm weather made the threat feel distant. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, the sky pale and cloudless. Then, faint engine noise reached the deck. At first, it was easy to mistake for wind or machinery deep inside the ship, but it grew sharper, closer, and more urgent. Something was approaching, and it wasn't coming in peace. The attack begins. The first sight of the boats was like spotting sharks. Small, fast, and spread out, they cut across the waves in perfect formation. Spray flew from their bows as they closed the distance. The sound of their engines became a harsh roar, echoing across the open water. Men stood on each deck, rifles slung over their shoulders, rocket launchers resting against their hips. They were shouting, though the words were lost in the wind. The cargo ship had size, but the skiffs had speed and numbers. Every second brought them closer. On the Redwood Star, crew members scrambled to their stations. A few grabbed shotguns and older rifles from the ship's small arms locker. Others pulled steel shutters closed on exposed windows. Orders from the bridge carried urgency, but stayed calm. The first burst of gunfire came from the sea. Tracer rounds zipped through the air, bright streaks against the blue. They clanged off metal railings and tore into wooden pallets stacked near the deck's edge. The crew fired back, aiming for the gaps between the waves. Their shots were measured, but they were outgunned. One sailor dropped to a knee behind a crate, firing and ducking in the same breath. Another crouched by a stairwell, pumping shells into his shotgun and sending them toward the nearest skiff. The pirates moved like they'd done this many times before, some circling wide, others charging straight in. When the captain saw 2 crew members pulled from their positions by incoming fire, he knew the fight could not last. Over the loudspeaker, he called for everyone to fall back. The crew carried their wounded and retreated toward the ship's most secure space. Above them, the thud of boots on steel signaled the pirates were already climbing aboard. The call reaches the USS Independence. Deep inside the cargo ship's fortified room, the captain lifted the radio handset. His voice was low but steady as he sent out a short-coded distress call. Then he set the receiver down and waited. The walls around them were thick steel, built to keep intruders out. Air hissed softly from emergency tanks. In the dim light, the crew sat in silence, listening to the faint clatter of boots and gunfire above. Hundreds of miles away, the signal reached the combat center of the USS Independence. The aircraft carrier was on routine patrol when the message came through. The room shifted from quiet focus to urgent motion in seconds. Operators traced the ship's position on digital maps. Voices confirmed the coordinates. The admiral didn't need a long discussion. 23 sailors were trapped, and every moment risked a breakthrough by the attackers. Orders went out in sharp, precise bursts. Helicopter crews ran for their aircraft. Mechanics checked weapons and fuel. On the flight deck, rotors began to spin. Pilots strapped in. Gunners swung heavy weapons into place. The carrier turned into the wind, preparing to launch its response. The mission was clear: reach the cargo ship before the pirates reached the people inside. The arrival and boarding. The first helicopter broke over the horizon in a rush of sound and wind. Its rotors chopped the air into a heavy, rhythmic thud that carried across the waves. Below, the pirates on deck looked up, some squinting into the sun, others freezing where they stood. A moment later, gunfire poured from the open side doors. Long streams of tracer rounds hammered into containers, cranes, and steel railings, forcing the attackers to scatter. A second helicopter appeared, this one bristling with heavier weapons. Its cannon sent bursts of fire into the far side of the deck, breaking apart a stack of crates the pirates had been using for cover. Shards of metal and wood sprayed outward, and the air filled with the sharp scent of burning powder. The pirates had seconds to move or be cut down. Then came the Black Hawks. They hovered just above the deck, ropes uncoiling from their sides. Figures in dark gear slid down quickly, boots hitting steel in a practiced rhythm. These were Navy SEALs and Marine Raiders, each one armed, focused, and moving with a precision that came from years of training. The teams split without hesitation. Some pushed toward the bow, others toward the stern, sweeping every open space. Short bursts of fire cracked out as targets were spotted and neutralized. A pirate near the main crane raised a launcher, but fell before he could fire. Another tried to slip behind a container and was met by 2 rounds to the chest. Shouts and commands echoed over the headsets. Each squad moved steadily, checking blind corners, clearing ladders, and pushing toward the ship's control areas. Within minutes, most of the pirates had been dropped or disarmed. Those still standing threw down their weapons, hands raised high, eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. When the last corner of the deck was secured, the SEAL team leader gave the call to move below. The hatch to the citadel opened, and the trapped crew stepped out into the sunlight, blinking against the glare. Above them, helicopters still circled, their shadows sweeping over the steel. The fight for the ship was over. The mission was now about what would come next. Interrogation and intelligence breakthrough. The captured pirates were flown back to the carrier under tight guard. Their wrists were bound, and their eyes stayed low as armed escorts led them across the deck. The heat from the sun was sharp, but the tension was sharper. Inside a shaded corner of the ship, translators and intelligence officers worked quickly. They spoke in short questions, pausing only to let the answers settle. At first, the prisoners stayed quiet, but with each passing minute, fear loosened their words. One finally gave up a set of coordinates, spoken with the weight of someone who knew what would follow. Maps lit up in the operations center. The location was a hidden inlet along the Somali coast, with small structures, fuel stores, and armed men. The admiral studied the feed for only a moment before speaking. The next phase of the mission would not be a rescue. It would be destruction. The drone strike. Far above the coastline, 4 drones shifted from their patrol routes toward the inlet. Each carried precision weapons designed to hit hard and leave nothing standing. Live feeds streamed back to the carrier, showing rows of huts, a few trucks, and long shadows of small boats pulled onto the sand. From this height, the camp looked still, but heat signatures told another story. Dozens of armed men moving between the buildings, and storage areas glowing bright from fuel and ammunition hidden inside. The first missile dropped without warning. It struck the largest structure in the center of the camp, shattering it into a spray of dust and flame. A second drone targeted a line of trucks near the water. the explosion tossing them into the air like toys. One by one, the rest of the drones fired. Secondary blasts rippled through the inlet as stored rockets and fuel barrels ignited. Within minutes, black smoke rolled across the coastline, and the shapes of the camp were gone. On the carrier's screens, the inlet was now only wreckage and fire. No soldiers were sent ashore. No warnings were given. The strike had ended the threat before it could leave land again. By the next sunrise, the change was clear. Harbors once crowded with small pirate boats were silent. Fuel drums were rolled into warehouses and covered with tarps. Radios that had buzzed with chatter now carried only short, nervous voices. Satellite images showed empty beaches where skiffs had been lined up only days before. Merchant ships moved through the shipping lanes without spotting a single fast boat. Word of the destruction had traveled faster than any patrol. For the crew of the Redwood Star, the fear that had gripped them in the citadel was gone. They stood on their deck under an open sky, knowing they had been pulled back from the edge. The strike was more than an act of rescue. It was a warning carved into the coast. For anyone thinking of pointing a weapon at an American ship, the message was simple: don't.